Hello, puppies and kittens. I'm having another casual conversation, this time with a Dr. Neil Hollyhoke. He's a physicist developing radiation shielding for the Athena Project. And what is the Athena Project? Because I feel like I'm in a sci-fi movie already.
It is an X-ray observation satellite that is going to be launched sort of around 10 years from now.
An X-ray satellite.
Yeah, so it observes sort of X-ray signals, it detects X-rays, and from there you figure out sort of what's going on in the world or in space.
Okay, well, the goal of this one, I would imagine, I mean, I've seen X-ray imagery along with like gamma radiation imagery to take pictures in, false color images for other planets. You're not focusing that on the Earth, right?
No, it's looking at other objects. Most of it's fairly deep space, but there are some sort of local stars potentially that it'll be looking at as well.
Okay, and what's the advantage of using X-ray as opposed to gamma radiation or natural color?
Well, you've got different sort of wavelengths of light are given off by different events and also absorbed by different things out in space. So depending on what you're looking at, you can see through different objects and you can pick up different objects that are out there.
Well, of course, you can see through those objects if you're using X-rays, I would guess.
Yeah, as a general rule. although oddly enough, X-rays are blocked fairly well by the atmosphere, but that's visible. You can see through that with visible light, so not always.
Okay, well, I had to ask, when you give it the Athena Project, I mean, just anytime you have something that's going into space that's named after Greek gods, it always harkens over to a sci-fi film of some sort. All right,
yeah, so true.
Yeah, you mentioned in an email that you wanted to chat about scientific topics. So I trust you have a short list.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a sort of few topics that I've dabbled in that might be of interest. One is this Athena project. My master's was in nuclear power, so everyone's always somewhat interested in that one way or another. And then my PhD was sort of involved a lot in steel production manufacturing. So I've sort of bounced around a little bit as I've been going on.
Well, I know that there's a lot of people that have been hounding me to make statements about nuclear power. Of course, I was completely turned off by Chernobyl and then Fukushima and so forth, and so I'm hugely distrusting. But I'm also realizing that we have to have an alternate some way. So I mean, and there are a number of people who keep trying to convince me that nuclear power is still safe. What would you say to that?
I would say that, on the whole, it is more safe than coal. But, obviously when it does go wrong, the big events are much worse. So the damage tends to be a bit more localized and it's a much bigger, much more spectacular event.
Yeah, because I saw quite a lot about Chernobyl, and one of the things being that they'd managed to avert. There was some declaration at one point, and maybe this was just in the dramatization that I watched, but they were concerned that if we don't contain this now, it'll kill Europe.
Pretty much no. It was never going to get that bad.
Okay, so
I think Chernobyl ended up releasing something like 5% of the sort of radiation that was of the radioactive material that was in the core. So, it could have been 20 times worse theoretically, but you're never going to launch all of it. So realistically, it was about as bad as it could have been.
And Fukushima, was that about as bad as it could have been also?
No, that could have been significantly worse.
Okay, because the way we have very sensationalist media in this country.
Yeah.
And nothing is news unless it's interesting, and it's not interesting unless it's dramatized and sensationalized. So the way that we heard it, of course, we're going to have, mutant fish all across the Pacific, and the people in California we're going to be suffering radiation sickness, and Alaska and everywhere else. We watch this arcing wave of radiation that the Japanese are lying about to keep hidden, and because everything's got to be blown out of proportion.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think it was 2015 that seafood caught around Fukushima started being considered safe levels of radiation again.
Oh, that was pretty quick.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of the radiation tails off very quickly. You tend to get a large burst initially, and then a lot of the isotopes decay quickly. So that means that they put out the radiation quickly, and then they're gone.
All right, well, I thought
there are some longer-lived isotopes as well that hang around for ages.
But weren't they using uranium to? Was it uranium? It wasn't uranium to lead in this case, was it?
It would go to lead eventually.
Right, the way it works is, this is like one of our longest lasting. So I'm confused as to how.
Yeah, because the way it works is your natural uranium is like 99% uranium-238 and some tiny fraction of uranium-235. So first step you do is you need to enrich the uranium to get more 235 and less of the 238.
Okay.
And then what you do, as you have decays, they release neutrons. And then when a neutron connects with a uranium-235 atom, it will usually split in two. So neutron goes in, the whole thing just breaks into two chunks, and some shrapnel, a few of the neutrons, alpha particles, that kind of thing, potentially. And then these two large chunks are themselves radioactive and break down and decay. And then you've got potentially big, long chains of these, of one thing decays into another, into another, into another, until you get down to lead is a common stable one.
Okay. So is that what you wanted to talk about today? Is that one of the topics, since you mentioned it?
Yeah, like I say, that's one of the topics that I'm happy to talk about.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. So again, sell me on how nuclear power is a safe alternative, because you said when it goes bad, we just need to make sure that it never, ever, ever goes bad, because it goes that bad.
Well, there's actually, there are sort of other incidents where things have been going wrong, but then they've been sort of caught early and corrected. So, so for an actual issue, you need everything to go bad.
Okay, what about deliberately going bad? What about when people want to make sure that this thing goes bad?
No idea how you'd do that.
Okay, so there's not a way.
Something that was mentioned sort of during my masters was, we would have been better off if on 9/11 they decided to fly the planes into nuclear reactors, because they'd just hit the concrete and they wouldn't get through. So
okay,
these things, the safety around these things is really extreme.
Okay, well, I remain unconvinced, but only because I need to, I guess, details and contingencies of that sort of thing.
So
we'll move on. We'll move on to another topic. I'm not completely dissing the idea. I await conviction, I guess.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, it is a thing that when it goes wrong, it's spectacular and gets all of attention. And also there are sort of legitimate issues about what to do with the high level waste that you generate that is difficult to solve in the long term. But I think sort of at least as an intermediate step, it's the better choice than coal, while we better develop the infrastructure for greener alternatives, solar, wind, whatever.
Yeah, even if it wasn't better than coal, anything at this point is better than coal. It's just how fast. How fast can we erect enough solar and wind farms and tidal farms and that sort of thing?
Don't know.
Yeah, and
not quick enough, I think. But yeah.
I don't know that we would ever be able to have fields of generators or collectors like that would be sufficient for energy needs. But we're not going to have coal much longer anyway, no matter what we do. So
yeah, coal, oil. We keep finding more, but eventually, yeah, we're going to run out of that.
yeah. So what else did you want to talk about?
Like I say, I was fairly open to ideas, and like I say, I was just open to see what happens.
Okay.
But yeah, on the sort of green energy issue, the other issue is a lot of it is sort of temperamental. Like you don't get the sun all the time, so you need to be able to store it, and we don't really have sort of the same level of energy storage that we need on a massive scale. So again, that's another thing that needs developing better than it currently is before this fully takes off.
Yeah, and when we started with this current administration and our beloved leader decided,
your beloved leader,
decided that we were going to completely diss on green energy. We're not even going to invest in that. We're going to look at re-exploring diminishing fossil fuels and be beholden to those who can only see to the next fiscal quarter and not 1 minute beyond that. And so yeah. I saw other companies and countries that were making huge investments, generating jobs, and producing an industry for green energy that we should be leading. Because I thought as a patriotic American, we should be leading that new frontier. But of course, we're not.
Yeah, I've never quite understood patriotism, but yeah, you like your country, fair enough. Just do something to earn that.
Yeah.
Which some people are definitely trying, but people who have the power to do things seem to be more inclined to just wing it and hope for the best.
Yeah. So that's where we are. I think.
Sort of on the energy issue, the other thing is nuclear fusion is that's been 20 years away for 20 years or something, or 20 years away for 40 years probably by now. It promises a lot, but actually getting it to work is a nuisance.
Yeah, well, I would like to see a more reliable, electric grid. I'm quite happy with some of the things that electric cars have done, and not the least of which being that what they've done with internal combustion engines. I mean, suddenly we have car companies that are producing 700, even 800 horsepower vehicles out of the same size engine that they used to have.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of efficiency. How long have you been able to do that? it's like
I'm not a car person, so in all honesty, I have no idea.
They start producing electric cars, and then suddenly the internal combustion engines get really, really efficient and really super powerful.
Also, interestingly enough, the whole electric car infrastructure is an idea that I've seen posed as a solution to storing all your solar and wind energy. Because you still don't have this single monolithic energy storage, but all of a sudden you've got like thousands and thousands of batteries around every single city. So in theory, energy, so when you plug your car in for the night, electricity going in and out might help balance the load on renewables.
Okay, I see the point there.
It'd be nice if all of these things sort of come together and start working out, but a lot of it isn't quite there yet.
Yeah. So I mean, I would rather that we not have quite such dependence on cars. Anyway, I mean,
yeah.
I quite liked when I was in Europe and I could take trains like everywhere. Of course, that's probably not the subject to bring up during a global pandemic where we're all supposed to be self-isolated. And honestly, if I were in London, I would have to take self-isolation really seriously because because you can't go anywhere without being packed in with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I live sort of in a smaller town and sort of right next to a park. So I have been sort of going out for walks days and sort of keeping my distance, but there aren't many people out at any given time at the minute. So, it's easy to keep away from everyone. And the roads right now do look lovely. There's a relatively small number of cars on them.
Yeah, well, I always wanted to see us be more efficient. I would rather see us be packed in our cities a little tighter and and leave more of nature to nature, But obviously, as I said, that's during a pandemic, not the time to discuss that because there's obviously flaws with having everybody packed in. I would like to see most of a city being in one building. I think that would be kind of cool, like a massive hive. Because we do everything in our lives in corridors anyway, so everything's interior hallways, and that's whether it's hospital, university, administrative building, any number of others. We're always inside some building, and may as well all be interconnected. Why have one 50-story tall building across the street from another 50-story tall building next to another 50? Why not just have them all be one building?
Because different people own the buildings. And,
But we have we could have like one massive ziggurat made of of all of these different centers and like I said, a hospital and university and an industrial complex and everything, and they all can be interconnected, and then the heating and transportation, we wouldn't have to worry about all of that. Yeah,
there's definitely some good things to be said for that, but I do, I'm a free range person. I like getting outside as well, and if we're all living in these giant skyscraper cities, maybe that won't be so much of a thing.
Yeah, well, my thought on that is that we have roads everywhere, and on all of our roads, we have road kill. So we have all these roads that many of them are unnecessary. We've made a huge grid out of everything, so that there's no migration for a lot of animals anymore.
Yeah,
we just end up being the only significant vertebrate left on the planet, except for the things that we've kept around to eat.
Hope not, because well, it's far more interesting and with a range of species out there.
That would be my thought.
But,
so consolidate a bit and leave the rest of nature to nature. But of course, that's not the plan anymore. The plan is to drill the hell out of all of our national parks for oil.
Yeah.
All right. So what was the other topic on your list?
Well, like I said, I did my PhD was sort of on the steel industry and how that's made, and again, that's got ties into this green energy using less resources, because there are moves in the steel industry to improve efficiency by quite substantial margins.
How so?
Well, sort of the way steel is conventionally cast, so the techniques that have been around for a few decades, is you've got this mold that's 20 centimeters thick or so, and you've just got this slab of steel continuously coming down, and then you roll this 20 centimeter thick slab of steel down to 2 millimeters for what you're using. So you've got all this energy going into rolling it and reheating it and whatever. But there are new techniques coming in now that allow you to cast directly down to 20 millimeter thick pieces. So it's cutting out all of these extra steps of rolling and reheating, like I said.
Okay.
So, and this, the estimates are energy reduction of 80 to 90% over conventional techniques. Of course, we haven't used them sort of until recently because they're a real nuisance to actually get working.
Okay. You went completely over my head with that. Sorry. I've got nothing to contribute to what you just said.
Okay. Let's try again. When you're casting steel, you got a big pool of your molten steel, and it comes through a slit in the bottom of the chamber, essentially, and this just continues coming out indefinitely. You keep adding liquid in the top, and it can keep coming out as long as you want, essentially. So it's called continuous casting. And it comes out the bottom of this somewhere in the region of 20 centimeters thick.
Okay.
And then in order to get it down to sheets that you would actually use, you need to go at it with rolling pins, essentially, and squash it down to sheets that you would actually use in everyday devices, in everyday products. And while this is going on, you will also often have cooling and then reheating, so bringing it back up to a few hundred or 700-800 degrees, if I remember rightly. So you've got all these processes going on that are just taking loads of energy. And then we've got new techniques coming in that you can cast directly down to more like 1 centimeter thick.
Okay.
Did that make a bit more sense?
I don't see where the environmental advantage is, or how it improves efficiency to make it thinner.
Because you need it thinner to use it. So if you make it thinner immediately, you don't need to spend energy heating it up again or put the energy into squashing it.
Sorry, that was the part I missed.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because those processes are sort of very energy intensive.
Okay, got it.
And yeah, while my project wasn't actually working on those directly, I needed to know about them because the steels I was working on can't be produced using conventional casting techniques, but they might be suitable to these techniques.
Give me an idea, because I mean, we just saw the Cybertruck announcement, where they said that it's made out of cold rolled stainless steel that can't be manufactured the way other steel cars can, and that's why it has to have that ridiculous shape that makes it look like it was designed by a 5-year-old in a moment.
I vaguely recall seeing something like that, but I don't know about exactly the processes they involved in making that.
It was a very awkward, uber simplistic design. It actually did look an awful lot like a child's drawing. Yeah. And on first thought, we were all like, it took you years to design that.
Hopefully, the design was going on the insides.
But then the explanation was that it's a unibody frame that's made out of this super hard rust-proof steel, and it is so hard that it was not possible for them to give it a regular shape.
Quite possibly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that could be a thing. If it's particularly hard, then you could have a hard time manufacturing it into shape. It could crack while you're molding it. So, yeah, that is a thing that can happen.
Sorry, I have the alarm system going off again. Shut up!
Yeah. I knew that was going to happen coming in because it happens to everyone.
Yeah, and obviously this the same thing is going on when I'm not on camera. It's just almost near constant barking with this thing. Sometimes I just want a trank gun. Anyway, all right. So what else would you like to give? Did you have anything else on the list?
It might be worth sort of going back to the Athena thing a little bit.
I'm sorry?
It might be worth going sort of back to the Athena thing a little bit.
All right. Take us there.
Because, well, yeah, I mean, like when we touched it at the start, I never actually even got round to, what it stands for, because, everything's got to be an acronym these days. So Athena is Advanced Telescope for High Energy Astrophysics. And they've taken the E and the N from energy to get it to say Athena, because they all also have to be a bit forced these days as well. I mean, it can't be natural. It's got to be, this kind of works. What can we include to get it there as well? But yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, like I say, and then that's X-ray detectors, X-ray optics are a real nuisance again, because all the tricks that you normally use for optics with visual light don't really work that well for X-rays. So you need to come up with new techniques to get that even working. Like, what is it? Refractive index, so how much light bends as it goes from one substance into another. Like for visible light, you see this when you're looking through water and all that, but for X-rays, most materials it's the same, so it just goes straight through.
So what is the aspiration or the hope or the question to be answered by this project?
There's a whole load of questions that this thing's hoping to answer. I've got a sort of vague list of sort of the things that it's planning on looking at here. So one of the main things it's looking at is the formation of galaxy clusters. So looking at you've got this gigantic clouds of gas and dust, and how does it go from that to being a whole cluster of dozens, hundreds of galaxies?
Okay.
Another thing is sort of the chemical composition and large-scale structures in the gas and material sort of between galaxies. Because you think of space as a vacuum, but there's still a little bit of stuff there.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing for most of our space travel movies. You're trucking along at as close to the speed of light as you can get, and then you happen across a rock.
A grain of sand will do the trick if you're traveling that fast.
Yeah, and it's that rock, from its own perspective, seems to be sitting still, but is actually going at about 22,000 miles an hour relative to your position. You're doing
still
something
pretty slow.
Yeah,
but like between galaxies, you're looking at densities of like 1 atom per cubic meter or something like that, something ridiculously low. But still hoping to get an idea of exactly what's out there.
Is it really 1 atom per cubic meter anywhere?
Like I say, I think that's the number for sort of like between galaxies.
Oh, okay.
Which is
I would accept that, between galaxies.
Yeah, because like you go up into space sort of within the solar system, there's still like loads of stuff floating around. You go out to between star systems and there's a lot less stuff, but there's still some there. And then you go out to between galaxies, and again, there's much less there, but still not quite nothing.
Yeah.
Another thing it's looking at is sort of the interactions between active galactic nuclei and the galaxies that they're in. So an active galactic nucleus is, we think, like a supermassive black hole that's actively pulling in material and giving off obscene quantities of energy. So they're looking at how that interacts with the galaxy around it.
Okay. I did not do a lot of study on cosmology or astronomy.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure what the latest concepts on black holes are. I'm always reading some story that they've just found another black hole too big to exist, or some such thing. And now they say, and that they're saying that like the center of every galaxy is a black hole, at least one.
Not necessarily every galaxy, last I saw, but yeah, a lot of them. But yeah, like there are multiple scales of black hole that are hypothesized to exist, and 2 of those that we're fairly happy we've observed and we're confident they're things. There's stellar mass black holes, which is when a single star explodes, and then you get a mass like the size of the small, maybe 5 times the mass of the sun, squashed down into the size of a small town, and then that's a stellar mass black hole. And then there are supermassive black holes, which are the ones we think we find at the center of lots of galaxies that are millions of solar masses in size, and we're not really sure how they form yet. Which is another one of the things that Athena should be looking at, is how do supermassive black holes form and develop.
So one of the myriad questions then is going to be the substance of space-time. I'm guessing not. Okay.
I'm not quite sure how to make sense of that.
We're talking about
sentence.
black holes and what black holes are. I've never heard a black hole described as being the size of a small town.
Well, yeah, because you take sort of this enormous amount of mass and crush it down to being literally kilometers across. Well, I say that's probably sloppy wording, because as far as we know, the matter itself collapses down to a single point, and this several kilometers or dozens of kilometers measurement is the point of no return. If you're sort of outside that radius, you could in theory get away again, but then once you get within that radius, then the escape velocity is above the speed of light. Space-time starts getting really weird, and there's no way out. So, that's sort of generally how you look at the size, is how big is this horizon.
Okay. Again, completely beyond me, and well outside my, I don't want to say field of interest. If I
Field
were
of expertise.
I hesitate to say expertise on anything either, but
To be fair, that's quite possibly a sign that you do have expertise in some area, because you respect the amount of time and effort that's required to actually know stuff.
Well, thank you for that. It's funny. I
Yeah.
was just on a scientific expedition where I asked somebody, one of the geologists. He says they were looking for volcanic ash samples for radiometric dating, and I said, "Which type of dating do you use?" And he hesitated to answer because it wasn't his field.
Yeah.
But you still know which method they used.
Yeah. Again, that's sort of what I was just saying. It's like the people who do know what they're talking about quite often are quite cagey about stepping outside of this area.
And I saw that again and again. Well, it's
Yeah.
not my field, so maybe you should ask him. But of course, there was also the advantage that the expert in the field, was also sitting around the table with us. So
yeah. Also, yeah, if you're all there, you can just point to the person who knows this even better than you do. If you didn't have the whole group of them, maybe they'd have been a bit more willing to give their best interpretations.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the fact that you went along on the expedition suggests, you've got at least a decent clue what's going on. They're not going to invite some complete randomer.
I didn't embarrass myself for my ignorance, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you can go on something like that without embarrassing yourself, then
when I showed up carrying 1 liter of water when I really needed probably 4, that was embarrassing. But
okay, so you know what you're talking about, but without some help, you might have just dehydrated and died.
Yeah. Yeah. That first day in the desert was pretty harsh.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Deserts are not my preferred location. I do not like hot weather.
Yeah. So you said you're in a small town in the UK?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're launching this project in 10 years. You said there's loads of questions that it will answer. I suggested maybe.
We hope.
But no, go ahead.
We hope it'll answer.
Okay.
But yeah.
I thought maybe that we were going to be doing like the nature of, one of them might be, the nature of black holes, like what is it a hole in, and therefore raising the question about what is the substance of space-time, because I know that that relativity is being questioned, and a number of other concepts that don't quite line up. So we're looking for a better theory of everything. Does this project have anything to do with that, or is it looking toward cosmology? I mean, the origins of everything, or the spread or inflation of the universe? What?
There's nothing sort of as far as I'm aware, on formation of the universe or like inflation, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But like I say, it is looking at large scale structures So that could have some feedback into these areas.
All right, give us an idea of large-scale structures. Are we talking about like stellar cloud
We're
formation?
talking about clusters of galaxies.
Okay.
So, like, basically sort of as big as you can get without just saying everything.
I saw a wonderful model, a computer-generated model that shows galaxies in rotation and how they react with each other, like
when they go through each other.
Yeah, that was quite beautiful, just to be able to see that in motion and realize that you're just looking. When you're looking at space, you're looking at a still picture, and you'll have to wait at least 10 years for the next frame at 24 frames per second.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's quite that quick, but yeah. These things, yeah.
Well, I mean, your standard film reel would be like 20 or 24 frames per second. I'm just guessing that it would take, each frame would be perhaps decades of our time for each single.
Something like that. Yeah. These things happen on just almost incomprehensible timescales.
I wouldn't say almost. I'm not able to comprehend it.
Yeah, I think if you spend enough time in physics or another field that has you dealing with just stupidly huge or small numbers, you do eventually start to get some grasp of just what's going on here. I mean, definitely not a good grasp of the scales, but you do start to get a bit more of an understanding of the difference between us and everything else. And the Athena Project, like one of the sort of going off on a tangent back to that, one of the detectors has sort of a field of vision, which is sort of the angle between what it can see on each side of about a third of a degree is sort of the space, the angle this can see across at any given time, and it's looking at these. It's going to be looking at these galactic clusters. So they're just, again, so massively far away that this fits in that tiny little angle.
I have to, in my hobby, let's call it, I have to talk to a lot of geocentrists and flat earthers and people who believe that there's no such thing as space.
Mm-hmm.
And it's remarkable to me. I mean, seriously, never picked up never gotten a hold of a telescope that was bigger than something you could hold in your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I had probably, growing up in the UK, it was probably quite different to over in the United States. And I was about 20 when I started coming across your videos of foundational falsehoods of creationism and Thunderfoot's Why People Laugh at Creationists. And it was about then, when I was 20 years old, that I realized people actually believe this. like until then, like growing up, I took the whole Christianity thing as like the Tooth Fairy or the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. It's like no one actually explicitly says it's all just a joke. We don't actually believe it. It's full pretend. But everyone knows that no one actually believes it. So that was a bit of a shock to the system, realizing, wait, no, people actually do believe these things.
Yeah, I wish I was raised in the environment that you were. Unfortunately, I was raised in an environment where absolutely everybody did believe that, and nobody knew what the hell science was. Mm-hmm. I was never a creationist. I always accepted evolution because I was lucky enough that they didn't indoctrinate me early. They waited till I reached the age of reason, which for me was, for my family, that meant second grade. Yeah. And by that time, I'd already seen like books about dinosaurs and stuff, and so I had a good layout of like the history of the Earth formation and life's development and that sort of thing. But absolutely everybody around me, until my teenage years, everybody around me was a creationist. All of them.
Yeah.
I didn't meet a single person who knew what evolution was, much less accepted it, until I was in middle school.
Yeah.
And that was one of the teachers who very cruelly told me that there was no flood of Noah, because I thought absolutely everybody believes that. It's all over TV. It's all over everybody. So it must be real, right?
Yeah.
My only defense is I was 14.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a fairly reasonable defense. Actually, yeah, because I said that growing up I sort of never believed the religion things, but sort of probably around that kind of age, 10, 15-ish, I did go through every book I could get my hands on all the sort of cryptozoology, spiritualism, and all this sort of thing. Like alien visitors, I went through all of it thinking, oh, this is interesting, and then none of it was ever convincing. Just, okay, yeah, this looks good. What they got that confirms this is true? That's it. Maybe that's not quite accurate. So, I'm not sure I ever, really believed any of these things, but I thought a lot of them, they'd be really neat if they were true. And I was sort of looking into them, and one by one, they just sort of fall by the wayside.
That was me. I believed absolutely everything I was groomed to believe, except for creationism. I didn't, I understood. I saw God as arranging, let the earth bring forth, right? And that's what evolution is. So that's how it works. So that's how I interpreted that. And I also didn't give a lot of credence to the Bible, because there was a lot of stuff that the Bible said that was just obvious crap.
Yeah.
So I believed that there was a God. I believed that there was a Noah's flood, because everybody did.
Yeah.
But I didn't believe that the Bible was absolutely verbatim. Certainly not the Word of God. There was a lot of poppycock in there, and the whole Adam and Eve thing clearly never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, on this topic of looking into all these dubiously accurate ideas, sort of, as a child, I actually tested the tooth fairy. So it's like, just at one point, like through losing teeth, one came out and I just didn't tell my parents, just stuck it under the pillow like you would. Don't tell your parents. See what happens. I think you know what happened.
Yeah. I had the issue with Santa Claus. I mean, I maintained a belief in Santa Claus at 8 years old on the credence of my father's word. And so it was devastating. It was a devastating blow to my respect for my father when I found out there was no Santa Claus. I didn't care about Santa Claus. I cared about my father's word.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, like I say, that's sort of that's kind of the same way I saw the religion thing. It's this sort of shared story kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm quite convinced that the early books like Isaiah and such, these were not written with the expectation that people would ever take it seriously and believe it verbatim. That a lot of these stories couldn't have been written in that vein.
And I have no idea. But yeah, I have had a few discussions with Christians one way or another, and one of them, dismissed like the Greek gods as, obviously people back then never believed these stories. And I don't know that they did or didn't. And considering what you're saying is true, the whole Jesus thing, I don't think you're in a particularly good position to say, obviously 2,000 years ago, without any sort of advanced technology, people didn't believe in the Greek ones.
Yeah, I'm reading the Quran at the moment, and the claims made in the Quran about how ridiculous the Christian belief is amusing.
Mm-hmm.
When the Quran says the things that it says, and yet says Christian belief is ridiculous. That's funny to me.
Yeah. Although I'm not quite. Although it does sort of seem to be sort of a difference in how people assess reality, kind of thing. Because I did have a back and forth with one of the apologists that I know on Facebook a while ago, and I started asking some questions like sort of how do they accommodate all the different varieties, because he's closely tied to the sort of conglomerate of university-based Christian groups. So they obviously tried to cater to the moderates and the fundamentalists and the literalists and all that. And so I'm sort of questioning this. And I sort of point out that evolution, you can't really have it both ways. You've got to go with one version, or you've got to accept it or reject it. And his response to that was saying that discussion of evolution amongst Bible-believing Christians is in part an in-house question. Just, wait, what? How is discussing evolution sort of an in-house question for people based on their religious beliefs?
I never did. I get a lot of these conversations, and I don't understand where they're coming from. I mean, I was in a church one time arguing with these people. I'm just trying to set up a hypothetical situation and look around all these folding chairs that they had out here. And in this one question, I'm like, okay, just answer me this: are there chairs in this room? And the answer was, well, David Hume says. I mean, why does everything have to be a philosophical escape from reality? That's what it all comes down to for me.
From what I recall, you're not much of a fan of philosophy in general, are you?
Oh, well, I told a philosopher this like 2 days ago. I said, he was asking why don't I like philosophy, and I said, well, I actually do like philosophy. It's just that in my practice of teaching people scientific concepts, the only time I see philosophy in use is in denial of reality, either little bits of it or all of it in total. It's always philosophy's purpose for the religion is to deny that reality is real, and I find that personally hugely irritating.
Yeah, that's fair, but I do think that there are some schools of philosophy that do have a bit of an issue, because while they come out with ideas that are internally consistent, they never really go further to finding out if the idea actually has any sort of grounding in reality. There's sort of schools that seem to go with, this idea is internally consistent, that's good enough, let's go with it. Which
and the
it's definitely a good start.
The people who think that they can logic up God, just attempt after attempt after attempt. I mean, and there's always a false premise in there, of course, but the coming up with some kind of a definitional fiat where you can, create this reality by some kind of a word game, that just doesn't appeal to me. I mean, I actually like philosophy in determining, like, the question about whether we have free will or issues of whether morality is objective, because I kind of think that on some degree it is. I mean, there's at least a staple
on your definitions there, really, I think.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely there's a universal agreement that hurting other people when you don't have to is immoral. I think we'd all accept that, right? But then other people will add other things to it, and that's where it gets subjective. Is where and the weird thing is that politics, I've seen, is actually less rational than religion, but is also a moral issue, because people will come up with political positions. They have no justification. There's no way to say why you hold a political belief or show that your political position is right.
Yeah.
But it very often does come down to whether you are denying or even obstructing other people's human rights.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I rarely sort of make Facebook posts, but during the last election in the UK, I did make sort of quite a lengthy one, encouraging people to look up the policies and check who they're voting for, and don't place a team sport, essentially.
That's a perfect example of why politics is very often so very irrational. The fact that you have to point out to somebody to look at the policy, that you're not voting for the person because they have the letter R next to their name. It's not here in Texas. People think that they are born into the Republican Party, and therefore somehow owe the Republican Party their loyalty. And the very idea that they would vote for someone who is not a Republican for any reason is something they don't even consider. I was at a rally where a Republican speaker said that if we want to protect education in the state, we will have to consider the possibility that we may have to vote for someone in the other party. And people were aghast at that thought. It's like, does policy seriously never enter into anything? Well, that's what it always is for me.
It does seem to be that a lot of people like to have an easy way to make the choice, and just sticking with the party you always vote for is one of those.
You mentioned sports teams. You did a comparison of people's religious position. We're not very often it's a religious position too, but their political position is very often no more substantive than whatever sports team, for their hometown or their high school or whatever. And I've certainly seen that. It doesn't matter what the policy is, you're going to vote for the party. That's it. And then there's no other consideration other than the propaganda that you're programmed to spill for that.
Yeah, I definitely know some people who do regurgitate talking points of political parties that I disagree with.
Yeah, I've been told that if I establish a scientific fact based on the literature of the scientists who published that the only reason that I'm holding that position is because I'm a Marxist. That
this is sounding familiar.
I'm not a Marxist, but that's the reason that I accept the scientific fact that is revealed in the study. It's not that the fact is revealed in the study. It's that it's my political extremism.
Yeah.
That I don't even hold. That somehow I make this.
Yeah, because I'm not quite sure where the British Conservative Party falls on the American spectrum. They're probably sort of a little bit to the right of the Democrats, I'd guess, but I'm not entirely sure. Well, but I know people who have been called like communist just because they are to the left of the Conservatives.
Yeah, I would say that the Democratic Party is a range, and it's splitting in half.
Yeah.
So you have establishment corporatists.
Yeah, I was thinking of the establishment corporatists when I was making that.
I don't think
comparison.
I don't think the Brits are further right than the establishment corporatists. It would be they're pretty far right.
I think that the Conservative Party that's currently in power is in the same sort of ballpark as them.
It was clearly comparable.
We've then got our left-wing parties that are actually, on the left.
Yeah, and
they're probably more in line with the other faction of the Democratic Party that is a bit more socialist and friendly of minorities.
If you realize that you are slightly left of the center line, so you can't say you're right wing, you are definitely left. You're on the left side of that line. That automatically means that you're all the way on the left. That you're as far left as you can be, because there's only extremists apparently.
Yeah, that seems to be, Although you do get the sort of same thing on the other side with people on the left just outright condemning sort of the Conservatives who are somewhat right-wing, but not like nowhere near all the way over to the extreme Republicans in the United States, just calling them like fascists and all that as well.
Yeah, so I would think
you do have issues there as well.
If you have to compartmentalize everybody into two categories and you don't accept that there is a nuance or an overflow or a Venn diagram, and I like to use a bell curve, that very, very few people are actually on these outward extremes, that most people are around the bowl down here in the middle, right? And so that's what the dividing line is. There are going to be left of that, left or right of that, but most of them are, pretty much close down here, and then it's fewer and fewer as you get out to the end. But the other perspective that I see far too commonly is that you're either or.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who can't even understand the concept of a centrist. And sadly, there are quite a few centrists that don't understand that concept.
Well, yeah. I mean, the trouble with the way the voting works is you do need to pick a side when you're voting, don't you?
Yeah, and I know this is completely off the topic we agreed to talk about, but I think the UK does this thing. Is it the UK that does when you vote? Do you get to pick like your first favorite and your second favorite after that?
No. We had a I can't even take the term now. We had a public vote on if we should change to that system a few years ago, and it didn't quite pass. It got close, but didn't quite make it.
Because I'm thinking something like that would completely overturn that voting for the lesser evil thing. And so that it would be possible that you could have two good candidates and one of them wouldn't ruin the other one's chances, or that they wouldn't both ruin each other's chances. Because if you're voting for two and you've got three.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like it would be a much better system.
It would at least take out the two-party thing that we've got. And I don't know how the UK does there. I love that you have your elections where like everybody that was involved still has to be on stage when they do the announcement, and then you have like you don't do the eliminations where it always whittles down to two, so where you can still have Lord Buckethead, from the very silly party.
Yeah, I can't comment because I didn't actually look at that party's policies before I voted.
Okay,
but
I like the fact that exists, and it's not the way that ours doesn't really work very well.
Although, ours does have issues.
Evil still means you're voting for evil. And so that means that the slide is incrementally ever slower this way.
Well, it depends which way the scale is going, but voting for the lesser two evils is the better option, but you'd rather be voting for the actual good party. Yeah,
that's my perspective, but
that is, I think, an issue that you get with the British system, because it is still, pick your favourite, but there are now multiple choices, so you end up with the vote being split a bit, because I would say there are like 2 right-wing parties and 3 left-wing parties that are across the whole of the UK and pick up a non-trivial amount of votes. So you've got the people on the left are sort of splitting a bit thinner because there's more parties to pick between.
Okay. All right. Well, we've completely wandered off the agreed on topic, and it always seems to go this way with me.
Yeah, it seems to happen.
Yeah. But so I'm gonna leave it here and let you make any closing comments, and I'll just shut it down.
Didn't really have any closing comments in mind, so just.
All right. Well, good to talk to you, Neil.
Yep, you too.
Thanks much. Good night.
Thanks for that. Bye.